And welcome into the Rant, everybody. What a night it's been. We are delayed because of the tornado warnings in Osage County, so rightly, weather has gone wall-to-wall with our coverage tonight. But the warning has been dropped, so here we are. Caden McFarland, Bill Haston, columnist with the Tulsa World.
Here we are, historic
and
Sunday night.
We have some news. Not that we're breaking it. First reported by James Hale, confirmed by your buddy Garen Emig not very long after. Mike Stoops out as the defensive coordinator at Oklahoma, spent 5 fantastic years in the early 2000s as the defensive coordinator with his brother Bob as the head coach, and now this is, since 2012 he's been the DC. The results have not been as good, and of late, 2016, 2017, and especially this year, man, it has been hard to make a case that he deserves more time as defensive coordinator, and yesterday was the straw that broke the camel's back, and I think we all understand why.
Garen Emig in his Sunday column for the Tulsa World from the Cotton Bowl used the word flashpoint to define this point in time with Mike Stoops and OU football, and I thought it was a sensational choice of words. I kind of, after talking tonight with Eric Bailey on our staff, who covers OU football at our office, he reminded me that OU has an open date this week, right?
Sure.
And there's been talk all day, would Lincoln Riley fire Mike Stoops? And my thought was, no, he won't, or he won't have to, because Mike probably is going to step down.
Okay.
But I was thinking, I was wired more to think at the end of the season.
Sure.
And then Eric Bailey reminded me, yeah, there's an open date. And I thought, okay, well, maybe. And then in the 5 minutes it took me to drive from the Tulsa World building downtown to the KJ Art Studio here in Brookside, it happened.
Pops, yeah.
And so, now there's myriad confirmations and commentary on Twitter about it. So
yeah, players have already put out tweets saying thank you, Coach Mike. I saw that from Kenneth Murray and I believe Caleb Kelly as well. Look, they love this guy. We love this guy. Media love him. I mean, he was the best quote for years. There in Norman, I would say. At least as long as I've been here, he's been the best. I was pulling for the guy for sure, and I think everybody was clinging to this. He coached such great defense for a half decade when he and Bob started in Norman. This guy hasn't forgotten how to coach defense, is what we all said, and people just kept giving him another year. Once he recruits this kind of guy, once he gets this kind of guy, once they're recruiting high 4-stars and some 5-star kids, and it just isn't close, Bill. I mean, I can't. When I first came here in 2008 and I looked out on the field, I had never seen a college football team look like OU looked at every position.
Right.
And this was on defense when, they were a better offensive team at the time. This was the Sam Bradford Heisman year. But on defense, they looked like you want to look. I looked out at the Cotton Bowl field yesterday. They don't look like you want to look at almost any position, especially in the back seven.
Right.
So small, and we'll roll some of the defensive highlights from yesterday. They just got pushed around. I mean, it is so far from good defense. I mean, we have reached the what are we even doing here status with regard to OU's D. I don't even know what the way forward would be.
I don't know.
With this particular group.
I've been aware of it, and I've noticed it, but it hasn't really resonated quite like it did tonight when I walked in here and you talked about how undersized Oklahoma is at virtually every position in the back seven. And then I think about it, and you're right. You're right.
And if it's not undersized, because Motley may be tall enough or long enough, but guys just get pushed around so routinely. I mean, you can't have it.
Right.
You can't, and it's, you can, Brendan Radley-Hiles is a playmaker. I think he'll be great. You can have one of those guys. Can you have 5 guys in the back end who are all smallish?
Right.
Like, I don't understand what they were going for in recruiting the last several years. To me, they've got to take a hard turn away from what it's been. Here are some of the key plays. Tom Herman said this was the play of the game for him. On 3rd and 21, they're pushing the pile for 19 yards. You saw it, guys unable to get off blocks, guys getting pushed around. I mean, that's the entire defense getting manhandled by Texas blockers. And it happened over and over again yesterday. I mean, when they were in the right spots, which wasn't that often, you get pushed around. You can't have it. It's not a good defense. It's so far from what OU should be defensively. That as much as we all love Mike, like you can't really come up with any sort of justification to continue this.
Well, the last thing I did before I left the office tonight was I peeked over Eric Bailey's shoulder to see what he was working on for tonight to post on the Tulsa World website and then to be published in Monday's Tulsa World. And I borrowed these numbers from him, and they're sobering and they're storytelling. So out of 129 teams, these are current figures, out of 129 teams at the FBS level of college football, OU is 96th nationally in total defense, 106th in passing defense, 97th in third down conversion defense, 95th in fourth down defense, and 124th in red zone defense. That covers it all.
What are they good at? What is their identity? He's been in charge for.
Well, their identity is what we saw on the screen about 15 seconds ago when 6 guys were getting dragged downfield by that big Texas receiver. And that's what we saw in the Army game time and time again, was not necessarily guys getting dragged downfield, but guys missing tackles, and a guy who should have been dropped for a loss of yardage on 3rd and 3 sure. ends up gaining 7 yards.
And to me, this isn't even like you can put it on the OU offense. Oh, they run 100 plays a game, so the task is just too great. Like, that's really not it. Right. Lincoln Riley has become a little bit of a ball control air raid guy. There have been a number of games where the offense runs 60, 65 plays. Right. They run the ball really successfully, and the defense just doesn't have any excuse for looking like they looked yesterday. Right. So anyway, that said, spinning this forward, we're waiting to hear from Lincoln Riley.
Right.
We think 2 guys on staff are most likely to be promoted to defensive coordinator. Ruffin McNeil, who was the DC at Texas Tech alongside Lincoln Riley as an assistant coach for Mike Leach, and then became the head coach at East Carolina. And then a pretty interesting name, analyst on staff right now, Bob Diaco, spent 4 years as the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame. They beat OU in 2012 in Norman, and then was the head coach at UConn. Not a very successful head coach, but in my mind, pretty good defensive coordinator. Either of those guys, what intrigues you maybe about the 2 of them with half a season to go?
Well, but my first thought is that because of Lincoln's history, personal history with Ruffin at East Carolina, yep. that we'll probably see Ruffin at the helm of the defense the rest of the way. Sure. That's my guess, because they, you know.
Although according to Bob Diaco's Wikipedia page, some wise guy has already updated it to OU's DC, but
yes.
Yeah, Ruffin would certainly make a lot of sense.
Yeah,
the familiarity.
That's my expectation. But beyond that, you know, who do they get in the offseason? I don't know. I mean, you just, I mean, obviously they're willing to spend at a high level. Mike Stoops currently is making $950,000. Garen Emig texted just a second ago to remind me that he's got 2 years left on a contract, so it's going to be roughly a $2 million buyout. For Oklahoma and Mike Stoops to part ways. So Oklahoma will pay at a high level for a coordinator. And there's a lot, like we talked about in your office, there's a lot of guys I think would love to coach at Oklahoma. Are you kidding? Would love to have that logo on their shirt.
Absolutely. Lincoln Riley gives you a chance to compete for a national title in all likelihood.
But may not want to coach in the Big 12.
Oh.
Buddy. I'm talking about defensive guys.
Absolutely. I mean, Jim Knowles, that was the storyline coming out of Stillwater
yesterday. Be careful what
yesterday.
you wish for kind of deal.
Absolutely. Look, it is a tough job. And we know that Mike Stoops hasn't forgotten how to coach defense. We know that. It just, for whatever reason, at this time in his career, with the players they've been able to get, just whatever it is, they haven't been able to make it work. And so we understand. It was a justifiable move by Lincoln Riley. That said, Bob Stoops, Mike's brother, set Lincoln up with a fantastic situation. You would think he is indebted to the family. I mean, how sleepless a night must that have been for Lincoln Riley? How difficult a decision? In regard to the human element of this story, we kind of buried the lead, because that's a big part of this story to me, because like you said, if not for Bob Stoops, Lincoln Riley is not the head man at Oklahoma right now. And there was no search firm. There was no, I don't believe, any real collaboration of the president, AD, Bob Stoops at Oklahoma to make the decision, yes, we're going to promote Lincoln Riley. It's my belief that Lincoln Riley 100% was Bob Stoops' handpicked successor. Yeah. And so that's a loyalty for life relationship. Sure. But then you've got that ongoing problem with the defensive side of the program, which was headed up by Bob's younger brother. And so what a conflict. That wasn't a sleepless Saturday night for Lincoln. I have to believe that's been weighing heavily on him since he took the job. You know, he was pulling for Mike to pull this thing out. You know what I mean?
Well, of course.
So many people there in Norman were. But at this point, you had a fan base that was almost unanimous in its desire to see you move on. And it becomes awfully difficult. You know? And then you can't put forth that kind of defensive effort against Texas in the Cotton Bowl. Like, it can't be done.
And then presumably, because, I mean, you just have to know that Lincoln's respect level for Bob is at the max level, right? So you presume there was a phone call on Sunday.
Let's go ahead and roll some of the video from yesterday if we have guys.
A phone call from Sunday, on Sunday, Lincoln to Bob to discuss this issue.
Yep.
And, you know, I'd love to read a transcript of it. Sure. We never will. We'll never know what was said, but I have to believe that Bob Stoops was total class and understanding of the big picture and the business of college football, and the bottom line, that it is a bottom line results business. Sure. And that the bottom line, that in the Cotton Bowl yesterday, the bottom line to this point in the season, and the bottom line for 3 years is not good enough.
Yeah. It is hard to imagine that they're going to make much improvement. I think they are what they are defensively at this point, but everybody knows that offense is good enough, and we saw it certainly in the fourth quarter yesterday. This offense is good enough to find a way to rally back and get into that Big 12 title game and win the Big 12 for a 4th straight time.
I could see this maybe shocking some players into maybe a higher level of accountability, and you know what I mean, and maybe just.
You wish it had sooner, but.
Well, yeah, of course, but I mean accountability, determination, physical commitment, whatever, however you quantify, you know, playing better and harder or whatever. I mean, maybe there'll be some of that.
Yeah.
But, you know, OU has not lost 2 consecutive Big 12 games since 1999, Bob's first season. And then, so they have the open date this week. 2 weeks they go to TCU. Tough assignment for anybody to go to Fort Worth.
You got to win, because that Texas team, I think they'll get tripped up somewhere. I mean, they were probably not, they're not as good as they showed yesterday.
Right.
But look, they're going to be there until the very end with regard to making the Big 12 title game. It doesn't look like West Virginia, even though they weren't great against Kansas yesterday, doesn't look like they're going to lose a whole lot of spots either. So maybe a must win. And maybe we'll get to the end of the year and look back and look at TCU as an absolute must win.
I think TCU, the TCU game is an elimination game. For both those schools.
That does it for our emergency rant, the Mike Stoops edition. Bill Haston, thank you so much. To the weather guys, thanks for letting us come in immediately after you guys finished.
The makeshift rant.
That's right. Sponsored by Jack Kissy Ford. We appreciate you guys for watching. Keep it here on Channel 2 for more on Mike Stoops, and then obviously the Tulsa World is going to have you covered extensively as well. Take care, everybody.